I'm talking today with Professor James Small. He's getting into the conversation now. I was talking about our native language and that we speak Dutch besides our native language. And sometimes it might sound odd when you hear us speak because we are not English. We are based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Welcome, Professor James Small. We did the introduction already, so we can start right ahead with thank you for your time because I know you've been really busy. This is the team, and this is Sntayehu, Omwale, and King Don Karleon. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you all for watching. Thank you all for taking your time. We're talking about spirituality today, get more into depth, because 2 weeks ago we spoke with Dr. Kaba, and now we're going to talk some more with Professor James Small. Could you please unmute your mic? Yeah, it's still muted.
I got it.
Yes, you're there. Welcome in our midst.
I'm sorry I'm a bit late. Even the old guy got to work. And since I'm on call, it's unexpected. And they just called today with a bundle of stuff, But I'm here. So
yeah, that's really good because you were saying that you are working on some project now and you had to finish that and still make some time for this talk.
It's called The Godfather of Harlem. It's a film, ABC Disney epic. So I'm the chief consultant. I'm the only consultant. So this morning I went through 3 scripts, that's 50 something pages each. And then the executive director called and says, I got this other script I need a response to by 3:30. So I've been trying to go through that. Don't like what I saw. So me and him going to have a kind of because I want to see Black people shown in the historical context that is positive and dignified,
Yeah.
So where are we going? Let's not waste our good time on that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to get off a little bit earlier than we were spoke, but we'll just
about 5 minutes to 3. I'll have to leave 5 minutes to 3 my time.
Okay, so we have an hour. So I think we have 45 minutes. So let's use that well. Everybody has his own topic expertise. So I'll leave it to them. The first question was, what is African sacred science? Because when we start talking, you was talking about African sacred science.
Right.
Can you explain that?
We use the term spirituality, but that term seems to be so overused and so misused to describe everybody else's thing. And what we are calling spirituality, our ancestors saw it as a sacred science. It was their understanding of cosmology, ecology, and the human being into relationship in those 2 spheres. When I say ecology, I mean the environment we live in, whatever is here on Earth. And then when I say cosmology, I'm talking about all the stars, the moons, the suns, the galaxies, etc. Everything affects everything else. And if you look at any of our sacred science systems, which we are falsely calling religion, which is a big mistake, we should not call African sacred traditions religion, because religion is an aside to another dominant social order that's in partnership with that social order. Let me give you an example. America is a capitalist imperialist country run by a capitalist imperialist ideology, but it is informed ethic and morally by a sidebar called Christianity, all right? Which does not have any dominance over true ethics or morals in terms of the behavior of the capitalists and the imperialists. But it becomes that place where they can go and rationalize and justify themselves by making reference to a deity and a set of rules that should govern human character development, but obviously history tells us it doesn't. In Africa, our way of life was the totality of everything. If you look at the name of God in any African language, it means the totality of everything. In the Ewe, they call it Sogbelisa. It means the totality of creation itself. If you look at much of the Bantu language system, you'll see that for person, for people, person, place, or thing, the suffix in those words for people, person, place, or thing is their word for God, and two, which means God is in everything. Okay, and so and you can find that in almost any of our language. And so what we're calling culture, at the core of what we call culture, is our understanding of the sacred science of how the universe and this ecology we live in work, and what our relationship is to that ecology, and how we learn from those natural laws how to create artificial social laws to govern our relationship one to another and our relationship to the environment we live in. So when the Africans in our most ancient script, you can go back as far to Kemet as you want, is talking about temples, they're not talking about buildings, they're talking about the human body as the primary temple. Okay. And so today, like we talk about eating green or eating holistic, well, in ancient times, that was normal, that you must give the temple what allows it to have optimal health, because it is that institution that allow you to have an optimal, what we call sacred view of things, to understand what my relationship is to the tree. You know, the tree is not something I can go and exploit unwillingly and just chop down at will, and just as we are destroying the rainforest and so forth. The tree was a member of the family with an equal place in that family as the human being. So if I need the tree, then I have to beg that tree. You know, the tree has to understand I need it to do something with. But then I would find a way to plant another tree to replace that adult tree. And so I would speak to the tree as I would speak to a human being, because the tree is life too. It gives off energy too. It gives off oxygen. It absorbs carbon dioxide. This is an intrinsic part of our environment that is in partnership with the thing called life. And that's true for every other life form, from the bird to the grass to the fish to the lion to whatever. And so we understood we had to have a relationship with the rest of nature and an understanding of the cosmology that informs and instructs nature. When we look at the sun, it doesn't stay in the same place because the earth is spinning. And in this spinning, different things occur when it's different distance from the sun. When we look up at the sky and we see the Big Dipper or Cassiopeia or another constellation, those constellations over time, over weeks, over years, shift position, the stars in them shift position. And our ancestors studied that when it's in this position, this is going on Earth, this is happening with my body. When it's in this position, this is going on Earth, this is happening with my body. And after a period of repetition, they were able to come up with concepts, ideas, and principles about laws and rules that govern the human behavior and the human family's behavior. And that is what I'm calling sacred science. And that, of course, involves, our mathematics, our physics. Those are sub parts of understanding who we are.
Wow. So,
and what we are.
So what you're saying is in tune with everything that surrounds you. So what does it has to do with where we are now then? Calling spirituality.
We're the same place we were 10,000 years ago. We're just not paying attention and learning anymore. If we had the body of knowledge that our parents had back in the village 1,000 years ago, we would solve the basic problems. Because if you take, for an example, this thing going on in America and the Black Lives Matter trend that the white media is pushing, but everything that they're now ascribing to Black Lives Matter has been going on all along. People have been in the streets after every death, not in these numbers. The numbers of people who responded to George Floyd was beyond anything we've ever seen. But there were always thousands and thousands of people marching with every one of our people who was assassinated and murdered by the state. The police is an arm of the state. It's not some little body sitting on the side. And it is protected and sanctioned by laws made by the state. And it is protected when it commits a criminal act against an African by the state and its judiciary. And so when we talk about them, we're looking at what people are now beginning to call, we've been talking about it all of our lives, systemic racism, meaning that Europe have always approached the world from a position of destruction and death, exploitation, and abuse. That's been the historical relationship we've had with Europe from the beginning of time. And they've built that in every ideological, socialist, Marxist, capitalist, it's built into their ideology. It's built into their philosophy. It's built into their attitudes as human beings. And that's what we have to fight against. And the best way to fight against it is to find out, what are we? Are we going to continue to be fragmented clones of their sickness? Or are we going to turn back to our ancestors and said, how did you understand the world? You know, how did you feel about the world?
That is really interesting, because how are we going to do that?
Study history. History will erase the mystery. You know, study history and the history of your people. You see, you know, I use the term, I said, we are gods having the human experience. I've been saying this for decades. First, people used to laugh at me, but I note now people are even writing about it using the term. And then I break it down. Each one of us, everything from the leaf to the butterfly to the bumblebee, we are all an expression of an aspect of the divine totality, having our peculiar experiences in the perfecting and the constantly re-perfecting of divinity. But in all of that, there are rules to be learned, there are laws to grasp, there are things we can adopt from understanding the macrocosm for this microcosm that we represent, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. Actually, I had some questions, Hotepu Professor, but you already answered it. So from that question to the next one, actually, because you already answered, like, how does African sacred science could be implemented nowadays with our daily behaviors and how we to the African people worldwide. The next question will have been like, what makes African science, sacred science, different to others like Asian or Middle East, if there is?
What makes it different is our longevity on Earth and the experience of our ancestors in that longevity. We are the first manifestation of the divine as human, and everything else that purports to be human is a mutation off of the African original stock. Okay? The mutation isn't just genetic, but it's psycho-spiritual as well. If you're deficient genetically, then you're deficient psychologically and you're deficient spiritually. Okay? And so we need to not be ashamed to deal with the truth of the science of nature as we understand it. And that's why studying our ancestors, you know, when you study history, you're studying your ancestors' experiences, where they made mistakes, where they were achieving. We learn how to leave those mistakes behind and learn from them, and to use the best of the ancestors' achievements to adopt and modify to our time now to take us forward. You know, we see people doing dance and theater, and they're calling dance and music and theater culture. But those are tools of culture. They're not culture. Those are the tools of culture. It is the idea of how the human body works with the rest of the universe and the environment. That philosophical understanding. That's culture. Now, how do we teach it to ourselves? We use music, we use dance, we use drama, we use poetry, we use theater, and we use institutional practice. Marriage is an institution, and then you practice it a certain way in order to be in harmony with the rest of the universe. You see, how did the universe practice bringing two opposites together to recreate themselves? When each of us was born, our mother and our father gave birth to themselves. They had nothing else to give birth with except themselves. So when we were given birth to, we were our mothers and fathers giving birth to themselves. Our mothers and fathers was given birth to by our four grandparents. And so our parents was their parents giving birth to themselves. Now walk that backwards. And where do you end up? With the universe in its totality and its oneness having given birth to the first African as a human manifestation of that universe. And I daren't tell anyone to challenge me. Study any African format you want. And one of the best ways to study Africa is to study the language of Africa, because our culture is not lost. It's in our language, okay? It's in our music. It's in our dance movements, okay? It's in our idea of life and death. For instance, and then I'll end with this piece. In the Yoruba, they have a word called aloha, which means to go and to come. But it's a dialogue about reincarnation. And the Yoruba said, we reincarnate, but not into butterflies or plants, animals. We can only reincarnate into the Ibi, or the family that we originally came to Earth in. So each time one of us is born, even though we are our mothers and our fathers, the energy we're born to receive is that of the ancestor who has gone before us, but still exists as us. So in one word, we are the very ancestors we're pouring the libation to. They live in every atom, every neutron, every proton in our bodies.
That's DNA, actually.
You know? But we have to learn how to access them through belief, through understanding, through behavior and practice. You know?
From that part, Professor, you spoke about the word in Yoruba. So could you tell us more about the Orishas and the Neteru, and if they are the same, or if there is any kind of similarities?
They're all the same things in different societies that we've created. The Neterus, the Loas in Voodoo, the Obosum in Akan, the Orishas in Yoruba. These are nothing but the qualities and attributes of the divine totality that we are able to recognize in its function. Our ancestors were able to recognize and extract in its function in nature and in cosmology, and learn to identify their potentiality in the human being. The idea is that these should become the building block of the human being, because each of them are sets of qualities and attributes necessary to construct a being that is divine in behavior. That's my best take on it.
Thank you very much. Sister, you can take it over. I have no question left.
Oh.
Everything has been answered so far.
Yeah. Oh, I'm one has a question.
Hotep, Professor Hotep.
Hotep, my brother, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Getting gray hair. I see you guys.
Yeah, you still look sharp. You look sharp. You look sharp. Don't worry about it. Yeah, Professor, so I have a question, and let me see if I can recall it. You were talking about the Atuma process, the reincarnation process of the Yoruba, right?
Yes.
So when, let's suppose that when we reincarnate, right? Can we reincarnate into another race?
No.
I know. Okay.
What our traditions say, as I know it, and I know it best from Yoruba, it says you come back to the Ibi. Ibi is their word for family, the family genetic strand that you originally came into being as, whether it was 1 million years ago, you are still that same strand constantly replicating itself. Okay.
Okay, so this perhaps it will bring perhaps a bit controversy, and perhaps it's also a bit philosophical. But let's suppose that I duplicate myself with a Chinese woman.
Mm-hmm.
Will one of my ancestors return in that child? Do you think
because you have now merged with that gene pool?
Okay.
So say you married a Chinese woman, you're an African man. When y'all create the baby, you've just recreated yourself. And and you've just now recreated her long line of cells. You brought about this merger. Remember, these are not separate races.
Yes. Okay. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
These are mutation aspects of the blackest black, which is the original manifestation. So sometimes the race thing can confuse us, because what they're really calling race is culture, meaning behavioral patterns, and then genetic proficiency or deficiency.
Gotcha.
On who they are. But if you merge with that gene pool, you can't just create you. You understand? You create also the aspects of that gene pool.
Okay. So, is it right to say that my ancestors cannot fully manifest themselves into my mixed offspring? Would that be accurate to say?
That wouldn't be accurate. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a Malcolm X or W.B. Du Bois. They could pass.
Gotcha.
Okay. Because we are proficient in terms of genotype, and they are deficient. So African genes will always dominate.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so when you create that fusion, you actually bring in an aspect of your branches back
in. Yeah.
So to say.
Gotcha. Okay.
In the Yoruba system, they said you have 8 times to be born and perfect yourself. And each of the 8 comings and goings, you have, I think it's 12 steps that you must develop in your spiritual character, your sacred science understanding and practice in order to escape ever coming back again. So you become a part of the greater energy that rules all of the living entities as we know it. So if you successfully develop and grow. So I always use the 3 orishas from the Yoruba to kind of give a sense. Oya, I'm a priest of Oya. But all that means is that I'm someone who somewhat learned in the science that is labeled Oya. Now they put in a book, they got a woman with locks and she's beautiful and shapely, but that's just a metaphorical interpretation of an idea in a human or anthropomorphic representation. But what Oya symbolizes is the human capacity to go through the process of change. Okay? But Oya gets stimulated by Shango, who's the symbol of the king. But not just the king, a king that is corrupted with envy and jealousy and ego. It is when he dies that he meets Oya. And Oya saves him by helping him to transform through change. And then Oya ends up marrying Ogun. We say Ogun is the god of iron, the god of war. But those are symbols. Ogun is transformation as a result of change. Shango is the idea of having the courage to change. Oya, it marries the process of change in the human character, which is Oya, which then marries the process of transformation as a result of change, which is Ogun. Now, I can get more complicated than that, but that's the general setting. And if you look up all of the orishas and start finding out, and it's a complicated science that our ancestors put together. So I don't want to trivialize it, but I know we've got a few minutes and I'm trying to be as simple. But if you were to really look, you take Oshun. Anytime we talk about Oshun, we think of a beautiful, sexual, sensual woman. All the beautiful women want to be told that they're the goddess Oshun. Half of them are not really Oshun. Oshun means intuitiveness, which is one of the greatest powers the human being have inside. Okay, that this intuitive energy that came with the beginning of beginning, and in the African system, there is no beginning and there's no end. To presume there was a beginning, you have to presume something existed before that. So now you got to find out that beginning and that beginning. And so there can be no such thing as a beginning in our concept of how things begin. There is transformation of how things express themselves. And so that intuitive energy, that is the thing that guides us, but we pay little attention to. And usually when we get in trouble and we say, oh, you know, something inside told me. Well, that's Oshun. That's that aspect of your being that never lost touch with nature, that can see around the corners when you haven't even studied how to see around the corner. But when you pay attention to it, you said, oh my God, the good thing I stayed home today, the good thing I didn't get in that car, the good thing I didn't take that plane trip, because something inside, that intuitive thing says, stop, don't do this, or view it differently, take another approach. That energy force is called Oshun. And in that sense, she's considered one of the greatest warriors among the Orishas, even though she's presented as the most sensitive and dainty, you know, and sweet. But in all of that flowering, she is a force of nature to be reckoned with when developed in the human character and cultivated.
Is she the segment on the Yoruba culture?
You could call her, Sekhmet would be an aspect of her. Sekhmet in the Kemetic culture comes very close to Oshun. Sometimes you may find one in, say, the Loas or the Yoruba, the Akan, or the Kemetic, where they have maybe one or two sets of qualities, where one society may have used 5 people to demonstrate those qualities. Another society may only use one person to demonstrate all of those qualities. But the key to all of this is our ancestors created a cultural system that allowed these things to be taught to us in our daily practice and behavior. You know? So when we think of family, let me show you this simple thing and then say, if you're in Ghana and you're old enough to be a young man's father, but you're not his father, he must automatically call you uncle. Yeah. But acknowledge your role as a father at the same time, automatically. The same thing with a woman who's old enough to be his mom, you know, but not his mom, he must automatically call her auntie. That's the law of the land. It's in the language, you know. And if it's a child who is young enough not old enough to be your mother, but not young enough to be your daughter, she's automatically addressed as sister. That's the culture. And when you practice that behavior, it informs relationships. So you don't rape one another. You don't murder one another, because the thing you call God, the divine, that you are cultivating in you, you learn to recognize it in them.
Actually, from what you just said, I did have another question about how do you incorporate astrology practicing this African sacred science?
All of that is a part of the sacred science. Remember, astronomy is the actual physical study of the bodies, the rest of the bodies in the universe. We created astrology as a metaphorical way to explain the science of astronomy and its effect on us to ourselves. I know people take astronomy just for the reading and oh, this is going to happen to you today and so forth. Well, it's much more significant than that, because everything in nature, everything we see, every planet, every star is giving off a light. And guess what? We absorb light that took 1 million years to get here. So you're a part of that universe. We are water and we are energy and we are matter. Okay? And so most of our body is water, 70-something%. But water has a strong relationship to energy. You know, we absorb the light from all over all universes. Some light may not have hit the light you are feeling today, may have been 5 million years getting here, but yet it becomes a part of you. So all of those bodies our ancestors studied. Where is Jupiter at this time? Where's Mars at this time? Where's Pluto at this time? Where's the moon at that same time? Where's the sun at that same time? What is happening to my earth around me at the same time? What is happening to my body? What is the yearning of my body? You know, what is happening to the plants on the earth? What is happening to the fish? What are they doing different? When all of these things are in this position, what is this relationship to everything else at the same time? And since nothing is static, it's constantly changing, then the science of understanding of the movements of things in cosmology and ecology and the evolution, they're all one thing. The Africans didn't separate them like the whites are doing. You got this study over here, and this study over here. Yes, they studied them, but they studied the interrelationship, the effects, the cause and effects that all of it has on one another. And at the end of the day, they created a dance, they created a song, they created a poem, they created a design for a desk, they created a sculpture that taught these things to us on a daily basis.
Yeah. Okay, Don, I know you have more questions. No, you have more. We only have 1 hour. You want to make it, yeah. So I want to. Sntayehu has questions too, and there are some questions on YouTube as well. And perhaps you should check Facebook as well. So Sntayehu, please.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. So thank you very much so far, Professor Small, for your great insights, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I have, and obviously, it's a big surprise to hear you are connected in any way to the Godfather of Harlem. I'm very much looking forward to see the next seasons and episodes of that show about Bumpy Johnson. But as collectively right now, as a people, especially here in Europe, I think there's a big disconnect towards African spirituality. And a big part of that is religion, like basically Christian religion is telling us in which ways, in how many ways our African spirituality is a bad thing. So my question is how does religion or does African spirituality really contradict religion? And is there a way in which even, for example, Christian could be merging his beliefs with African spirituality? So that's my first question. And one of the questions we were having on our live was about reincarnation, which we touched upon earlier. Is it possible to reincarnate, come back to the physical world as another gender than you originally were? So those are the two questions for now.
The first one, remember that history erases the mystery. We're not going to have an understanding of African spirituality if we don't have a knowledge of African history. It's just not going to work. People think, oh, I can go get initiated into Europe, I can get it. And you know nothing about the history that produced them. Because when you go back, you will realize that what they're calling Christianity is first produced in Africa. Even the Catholic Church having their liturgy where they refer to their early desert fathers. They're talking about Northeast Africa. 1,000 years before there's a Catholic Church, you've got a Sudanese church, you've got an Ethiopian church, you've got an Egyptian Coptic church. But they're not the same theology as the European morphed it into via Catholicism. Remember, all of the Protestant churches of Europe and the West that have now been soaked back on us is given birth to by the Catholic Church. After the Martin Luther revolution, then you get, you know, the others that come and bring you the Methodists and the Baptists and the Anglican and so forth. But all of it emanates out of a theology that is designed by the Romans. The Romans created that theology out of an African understanding, much of which you can find in Nile Valley civilization. So if you study ancient Kemet, there's one particular book I always make people refer to, and that is the pyramid text. And when you look at the Genesis story in the pyramid text, you see that's the same one in the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. It kind of changed a few little things, but unmistakably the same African. But in the pyramid text, it is more scientifically stated. You know, Amun says, I created myself out of myself. I caused existence to exist so that existing might exist. And when I realized that I existed, Ma'at was at my side. Truth, justice, balance, harmony, and reciprocity. Also representing the feminine aspect of the universe, while Amun is the masculine aspect of the universe. And then Amun said, then I assigned to Ptah. Now, Ptah is symbolized initially by a hill, which simply means matter. Amun is energy. You see, it's the primordial energy that creates Ra, and then it becomes Amun Ra. The sun symbolizes the energy without which all life ceases to exist. So now we got Ptah, which is the matter. We've got Ra, which is the energy. All right. They come together and they produce Shu and Tefnut, the moisture, the air, the gases, and the fragments and the dusts of the universe, who then produce Nut and Geb, meaning the planets in the sky and the earth and the human. And then out of that configuration comes Asar and Aset, the human beings. But it shows the connection to the creation of the universe by referring in the end. And then even in the dialogue, Amun says, I created, after creating everything, he said, I've created all my heart desired. Then I expanded in it, which means the essence of what we call God is in everything that exists. And then he closes by saying, and I came from my mother, Nun, which is called the black waters or the primordial waters. And we're talking about quantum physics because what he's making reference to is liquid matter. So once we go serious about studying our history, then we can get a better understanding of how these theologies got constructed. And we can see where the cultural damaging influence of Western theology via their religions is having in the attack on an indigenous African understanding of reality. Now, the question of gender, I hadn't taken it that deep. I think what's the brother from Burkina Faso, he wrote on it. Since energy, when we shed this house of matter, we become energy. You know, we said the body is dead. It's dead because it's no longer animated, because there's no energy in it anymore, because it has become injured and it can no longer maintain the ecological environment that will house the energy that you've created through your life experience. But where does that energy go? It needs another house. I'm not smart enough to say it can come in another gender, because in this world today, when we get into the gender issue, there's so much confusion that have come out of Europe and that Africans have accepted most through force about the gender question. In short discussions, I usually stay away from it. But in big discussions, we need to have it, you know. But people come in singular gender, even when they're born. Sometimes there's about 65,000 hermaphrodites born, physical hermaphrodites, but not total hermaphrodites, right? Meaning you may have two sex organs, but only one is functional. But Western medicine, for years, made the decision without even consulting families, and most of them they made into female when some of them were really males. So they've created a contradiction. I think they have to report it now, but they've created a contradiction in the world. There's a Chinese scholar that has even discovered the gene that produced the white skin that deals with calcifying the pineal so you can't produce the melanin because of the condition you were caught in at that particular time in history. Because there's only one human race. There's only one race. Everything else is a mutation of the original stock. But then we get into all these cultural variations and all these belief variations that determine habit and behavior and how we construct societies that we live in. And that's when shit get real confusing, because that's been dominated for the last 1,500 years to 2,000 years by Europeans, who were probably the most uneducated element of the human family over this last 2,000-year period. Even though they've invaded everyone else's country, they've gotten everybody's literature, they've gotten everybody's science, they're trying to roll it out a little bit at a time in terms of books and philosophy and etc. But I take the position, some people get angry with me, that if you're genetically deficient, you're spiritually deficient. As a matter of fact, your genetic construct will determine your capacity to contain spiritual energy and the amount and the depth of that spiritual energy that is possible to contain. But that, don't even mess with that. That gets controversial. People be like, you know.
No, but basically, so, but actually saying that points out probably the biggest problem with Christianity and trying to convince Christians of African spirituality, because basically learning your history would require them to study beyond the 6,000 years that their Bible teaches them they existed.
They don't even teach them 6,000 years, if you look at that timing. Okay. Because if you look at the timeline on Kemet,
yeah,
and look at the timeline that the Hebrew Bible is offering,
yeah,
you know, you're talking about a time that the so-called Hebrews say they came into existence. And my thing is like, okay, that's cool, but where did you have that existence? In Africa. Well, who was all those other people that you said you were running away from? Okay. And they were Africans. Who are you? That's where history helps us. Because if you study history, when the Hyksos invades Kemet, there is no Hebrews. At the end of about 300 plus years, when the Hyksos is being forced out of Kemet, then you get the coming of the Hebrews. So who are they? Are they a mulatto population? Are they collaborators? Because they didn't run south to their people. They ran northeast away from their people. So were they a part of the collaborators? But that's where history will help us work that out.
So historical fact gets denied by Bible believers a lot. So maybe that's, basically the basis of the question is, how do we still, even through their convictions, try to convince a Christian of that African spirituality does not bite theirs?
No, don't try to convince anybody. Let's study, learn, and practice who you are. Let your actions convince those who see you. I'm not even trying to convince y'all. I'm just having a conversation with some young people. You see, I believe my mother and my father. I believe my grandparents. I believe nothing or nobody loved me more than them. So let me study my history, find out how they behaved on the planet. That's called tradition. That's called culture. Before these other people invaded our land to steal our gold and steal our diamond and steal our bauxite and manganese, et cetera, and to steal us and our minds to build their societies, what were we doing? You know, and you will be amazed. We were doing some of the most beautiful things, in how to construct human relationship and how to deal with conflict resolution between humans when problems occurred in society. That's what makes up culture. Why you eat this food, why you wake up at this time in the morning, why you have the child at this time of the year, why when a child is born, you don't just take them out in the public, oh, we have a baby. You wait 8, 9, 10 days, and then you have an outdooring to present them to the community. Because there's some things you have to find out. Who is this child? Who has come back among us? And what do we name him? Now or her, now that they've come back. So all of that is a part of the cultural things we need to study. And I love Robin Walker's book, you know, When We Rule. I think it's a good introduction into history. And Robin has put together a lot of study guides around that work, which I think is good to move us forward. And then study the history of Christianity. Just do a timeline on it, you know. Just Google. You can Google and do the timeline. You're like, wait a minute. If the Catholic Church is only this old, and the Ethiopian church is this old, why am I even paying attention to that? You know what I'm saying? So let me go back and see what the Ethiopians were talking about. And then if the Ethiopian church was this old, but the pyramid text was here 30,000 years before that, then let me go and look at that. Let me look at the Book of the Coming Forth by Day. Let me look at the coffin text. Let me study some of these other literatures and see what our ancestors was trying to explain to us. You know, we are the entire universe, okay? We are macrocosm of the universe in its totality. What are the rules then that govern our behavior? That's what your culture is. That's what your spirituality is, when you learn those rules. And that's what our ancestors left us. And that's what the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims have been blocking us from. And then we are forced to deal at their level of barbarity and triviality. That's so you can murder whole populations and then go say a prayer and be forgiven.
Hmm.
You know?
Professor Smalls, it was really, I mean, really very good and interesting. But I see that time is going. And I want to ask you the last question. If you otherwise, when you come back, you know, if otherwise,
I'll definitely be back.
Because I want to ask you about the video. We talked about a video, and I think that's
the one where I'm beating up on myself and beating up on Africa.
Yeah,
that 4 minutes out of a 2 hours.
Exactly that.
I still haven't figured out who dissected that and sent it all around the world. But it's somebody who was pissed off with me about something. And I think I know who it was, you know, because I'd done this piece with my brother from Angola and Britain. And I was very harsh on the so-called royal family. There's nothing royal about those criminals. And then I was harsh on the colonialism and imperialism that the French and the British and the Americans have played in Africa. And I was outlining that they were coming back. This was right after the big economic conference in Switzerland or someplace. And the Brits was breaking away from the European Union. And their foreign minister had made a speech and talking about, oh, how they're going to build a maternity hospital in Kumasi, Ghana, and help to rebuild the road in Tim. And I goes like, Greeks bearing gifts? We got a history that tells us how that works, you know, of the Trojan horse. But I wasn't that pleasant in my description of what they have done to us in the genocide. And I even went in on the African government and leaders. I think I even suggest that if we can't do nothing else about them, we have to decide how to do without them. But I wasn't pleasant in that. But I know I made some people very angry. I even got on this Megan girl from America, so-called black girl, marrying into the so-called royal families. And then the first big trip they're gonna make is run down in Africa because Britain is trying now to get its place back in Africa. We're not gonna let China out-steal us. We're not gonna let China out-rob us. We need to get back into the bank and steal some more money ourselves. So I was like really nasty for 2 hours. And then 2 weeks later, they took a speech that I made some 5 years ago. It wasn't really a speech. I'm walking down the sidewalk. Let me give you the background real quick because people need to get this. I just gotten back from Ferguson, where our brother Brown had been murdered in the streets. And he got murdered because some Arab, I'm not calling them cousin, they were immigrant exploiters and parasites who owned the business in that community, called the police and lied and said the boy had stolen something, which the videotapes will clearly show later he paid for. But now he's dead, right? And we can't bring him back. But this happens to us all the time. Like I tell people, you heard about George Floyd and the world rose up the other day, but guess what? In the last 9 years, I've had 4,400 George Floyds that I had to cry for here in this America. And nobody was crying with us. And nobody was reaching a hand to support us. So it was in this, I'm coming back. I'm actually coming from my knee doctor, because, you know, I got this big problem with my knees, getting old and stuff. And I see the police putting big plastic bags in their car trunks, and the young men are out there arguing. They're taking their t-shirts and their sneakers. They were vending on the sidewalk. And like the Chinese store who said he sold the same things and that they were messing with his business by selling these things. And of course, the kids didn't have any license to sell. And I got angry with the African merchants, who the majority of the brothers on the streets, not standing up to defend these young people. And so in that dialogue, the guy asked me when I was Jack, he was trying to pull together a meeting every Tuesday to bring the vendors together, but none of the brothers on the continent would come to the meeting, you know, to try to create some bonding. So between the Ferguson, the kids getting their goods taken away by the cops, and I can't get my brothers to even pay attention. Somebody asked the question, what about these Africans? Why aren't they with us in our marches and our demonstrations and helping us to fight? So I go into a litany of things, but I start out with the African American, calling them white people in blackface and some other choice words, but they left that out. I beat up the Arabs terribly, but they left that out. I beat up the Chinese, they left that out. And in the end, I put a conciliatory thing on how African from the continent, the Caribbean, and the United States need to band together in order to be strong economically, politically, and culturally, but they cut that out. They took the piece where I go off on the brothers on the street. I was trying to shame them into standing up. It didn't work. You know, so, but that's what that was that day. And I didn't even realize I was so crude. I was particularly crude. And so I said that, you know, the cloth you're wearing is made in Holland and is made in India, and it's not even African cloth. So I'm saying, you're coming to fooling me that you're the real African and you don't have to deal with me fighting my enemy. And I talked about how in the rest of the speech, which is just about 2 hours and something, I'm out there just talking, that you have left, you partner with other people on an immigrant identity instead of partnering with us on a racial identity. So I said, you're like parasites exploiting your own people. And the details most people have seen. That's what that was about. And I've cried over that speech a lot, but it was 5 years ago in the midst of what had happened in Ferguson. And I said, I knew I was brutal. I was harsh. I am harsh. Sometimes I'm like a lie. Sometimes I could be real harsh on Black people. But that day I was very harsh. And it has hurt my heart too, because I don't like to be that harsh. Anything that hurt my people hurt me. And so even though out of the, say, every 100 calls I've got on it, 75% have been positive and understood, because a lot of what I said in there is true. Even though I said it very rudely, very harshly. Many of our people come to America and they're afraid to side with us because we are the antagonists to white people. And the white Americans see us as their enemy. So if you're an immigrant, which I understand, I'm not going to side with the enemy of the ruling elite. And my thing is, you better find a secret way to do it, because every time you get in trouble, it's me who go to the street. You don't come to the street to fight even when the African merchants are attacked or when an African, it's the African American in that street fighting for you. And we die for you. But the State Department and the Justice Department, it is a part of their policy. And the American Refugee Society, to instruct and inform not just our brothers and sisters from the continent, but our Latin brothers and sisters also, not to have anything to do with us, not to merge with our community, not to bond with our community. They have a right to do that, but we don't have a right not to bond with one another. So it was out of all of that I was coming. And we're not going to survive against this beast unless we're willing to have real unity. You know, I was a little off, and I'm saying we are the best Pan-Africanists. We're some of the worst Pan-Africanists on the planet. But I was trying to shame these brothers to stand up for those other young brothers. And hopefully there've been some reconciliation on the street, because over the years, I've seen the young brothers come back. But this was a dialogue 5 years ago under those circumstances. But let's not lie to each other. When our brothers and sisters from the continent come to America, if they move into a white neighborhood, they attend the white church. But when they move into our neighborhood, they build their own church. Oh, come on. Let's take some responsibility for our behavior. Okay? The fear of Black Americans, yes, we're 50 million strong. So we got some rough thug people in the street. Yes, we do. But I can go to Nigeria and find the thug people. I can go to Ghana, but I can also find the angel and the prince and the king. And you know what I'm saying? So don't just identify me by some rapper with his drawers hanging out who's a thug. That's not who I am. I'm 50 million strong. And even if I got 1 million or 2 doing that, that's not my whole 50 million people. So stop identifying me like that. We have churches, we have mosques, we have Prince Hall lodges, we have more colleges than any other ethnic group in this country dedicated just to us. And we have fought to be in every white colleges. And we fought for our brothers and sisters from abroad to have all these opportunities. We've never once said this is just for African Americans. You have never heard that in none of our movement. So stop leaving us to be destroyed by our enemy when we need you so badly. We need Africa. We need Africa to love us. We need Africa to say you belong to me. You know how I tell you, look on me?
Look on me.
You're mine and I'm yours.
Mm-hmm.
Practice look on me with me. And I will practice look on me with you. And all this comes from really not knowing history and the pain we've been through with slavery and colonialism and our struggle to go to these white metropolitans to try to make a life for ourselves and make a way for ourselves. And they still deny us knowledge of ourselves and they scorn us practicing our own tradition. All of these things factor in. But we've got to fight. And I'll end that with just this one. Amenhotep wrote a book back in ancient Kemet, back in the day. And Dr. Asa Hilliard translated. And he's talking about freedom. And he said, freedom doesn't make us free. He said, freedom is being shackled to your identity, to your goal and your purpose. This is an ancestor 30,000 years ago saying freedom is being shackled to your identity. I did a poor job on 125th Street that day, but everybody know who have called me what I'm fighting against. There's something I'm trying to say. And we know it's true about our behavior towards one another. You know, don't marginalize me and say, I don't have a culture and I'm not really African. And I am. I know my people's from the Mendi people. That's my great-grandma Hope. I know my people through Papa Andrew Small, who's from the Yoruba people. I know from the words and the language we still have. I know my great-grandpa Joe, my grandmother's father, is a Tutsi man. I know who I am, but I live in the United States where I've been for hundreds of years as a result of the genocide called slavery. Don't deny me, but then you can partner with the Chinese and you can partner with the Arabs and you can partner with the European, but then you're going to deny a partnership with me. That's what I was angry about. You can see it's still kind of in my spirit today. You know, that's what I was upset about then. I've got to find better ways to say it. We have to, on this side, take as much responsibility as we put on the brothers and sisters on that side. And I know you guys live in Holland. Even those who are more recent migrant to Holland have trouble with those who think they're really Dutch, you know, been there because they've been there for a while. And we've got to learn to reckon these relationships. And that's why our culture is so important, because that's the common thread. Our history is so important because that's the common thread. So that we can learn our history, learn our culture, learn who our heroines were and our heroes were, honor them, love them, respect them, you know? And then we can say, look on me.
Look at me.
I belong to you, and you belong to me. I am yours, and you are mine. Anybody who, when they get through with that 4 minutes, I've got about 5,000 other hours you can go and listen to, starting with 100 or more tapes on YouTube. And they're all at war on behalf of Africa and in praise of Africa and in elevation of Africa. But I can understand why some people's spirit was hurt seeing that 4 minutes if they don't know anything else about me. At 75, I've been in the struggle since I'm 14. I never missed a day at work in all these years. When Malcolm X got assassinated at 21, I'm the guy that took over. But I don't have to flaunt that to the world. My enemy know who I am. I was Al-Hajj Amin Shaheed. I went to Mecca right after him. I ran his mosque. I was his sister's bodyguard for 18 years. I was one of the chiefs in the OAAU. And the gods have allowed me to live all these years through all these things, the Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army. And I'm not ashamed or afraid to say before the whole world, I work with all those forces. I know Sister Assata Shakur. I knew a Tupac Shakur. Tupac's mother and father got married in the same bedroom me and my wife got married in nearly 50 years ago. But I don't flaunt that as who I am. I walk in nobody's shadow, just mine. I am who I am, given the work I try to do for my people. And that's all you can do. In a short while, this life will be over in this body. But I hope I leave some work here that is useful for the next generation. And my poor people, if I hurt your heart, please forgive me. It was not to hurt your heart. It was to say I'm screaming in pain that there's something wrong that we need to correct.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think if the message didn't get through, it has nothing to do with you. Really,
Oh, we will win. Swampo had a whole song, We Will Win.
We will win.
That's the theme of a song that Swampo from Namibia had during the fight against, the Germans and the Dutch and the Portuguese. It was always at the top of the head of the Swampo leaders is that we will win. Africa will win.
We will.
We will take our planet back, not just the continent. This whole planet belongs to the African people. We're the indigenous people everywhere in the world. Let's stop letting people marginalize us anthropologically, biologically, and archaeologically, and historically. Let's learn our history, learn our anthropology, study our archaeology, and put ourselves back at the center of the universe where we belong. We're God, having a human experience. Call us. Thank you. Thank you so very much, brothers and sisters. My favorite sister. I finally got to see her face. And you're a fantastic spirit,
Thank you. Thank you. So are you. I really enjoyed this talk and the talk with the brothers. You see, we are a team here and we really enjoy it.
We've got to do this again.
Please, yes, please. Let's do this again. When you have time, we can get more into it. We will recap this this talk. We will recap, get into it, get it into Dutch for the people who are watching and didn't really get it.
Yes.
And then we'll invite you again, of course, and talk some more because there were some really interesting things that we want to get into. Yeah.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. Thank you so very much. Thank the people there in your country, your adopted country.
Mm-hmm.
And remember what Dessalines said in Haiti, freedom or death. And our freedom is to be shackled to our identity, not somebody else's identity. To be shackled to your identity and your purpose and your goals.
Ingeta, Ashe.
Ashe.
Yeah, that's so
Look at me.
I think we just wrapped it up. He's gone.